Welcome everybody to a new episode of Let's Talk Movies. Let's talk movies. Chariots of Fire. Chariots of Fire is the episode we're doing today. John picked this movie. He was going for like a classic vibe. And he's like, man, you're going to like this movie. It's about running. It's not about fire or chariots, but it's cool. And I said, let's do it. We watched it last night. I was so sleepy. I was like, John, can I please sleep before we do this episode? He was like, yeah. So we slept, and now we're all jazzed up and ready to tell you about this movie. John, will you tell us a little bit about this movie?
This is the 100th anniversary of the events of this movie.
Awesome.
So the two runners that are the main characters of this movie are the Scotsman Eric Liddell. This guy runs for the glory of God.
It's this guy.
Yep. So right here, being held up by his comrades, by his fellow Olympians. Or Olympic competitors, whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, Eric Liddell, he runs for the glory of God. He sees, sorry.
I just want to make sure you don't slide out of frame there.
He sees running as a way of glorifying God. He has a line in the movie where he says, I believe God made me for a purpose, for China. His parents were missionaries to China. He was born in China, and he grew up, evangelizing people in China. So he says that he believes that God made him for that purpose, but he also made him fast. And he says that he believes that when he runs, he feels God's pleasure. So he runs for the glory of God. The other main character in this movie is a guy named Harold Abrahams. He's a Jewish. He's Jewish. He's the son of a rich financier in London, and he attends Cambridge. And he experiences a lot of anti-Semitism while he's at Cambridge, and he believes that being Jewish kind of sets him back, and he doesn't get all the equal opportunities as Christians do or non-Jews do in general. And so he sees running in a very different way than Liddell does. He sees running as a way of kind of justifying his existence, as he says, and like showing that he's not inferior because he's Jewish, and kind of he runs to overcome prejudice, and that's his thing. That's his whole idea about running. And however, both of these men face lots of obstacles in their running, particularly in their personal relationships. Eric Liddell faces a lot of challenges with his family, but you have these guys preparing and competing, getting ready to run in the 1924 Paris Olympics, and they're dealing with all these personal relationships.
And I think we can touch on this a little bit in the themes, but I think that the fact that he meets Sybil while she's being a Chinese in that Chinese play, like there's a tie there. There's some significance to the.
She was a Chinese,
and I think there's a little bit of symbolism to unpack there. But before we get into all of that jazz, you're gonna give us the specs.
All right, yeah. Let me get this Louis out. The loogie's gone.
The loogie's gone, folks.
We're ready.
The airway is clear. We are ready to go.
So this movie, Chariots of Fire, came out in the year 1981. It was directed by a guy named Hugh Hudson. Fun fact: this dude was he had directed before this. He had never helmed a feature film. He had only directed very high quality, high budget commercials and such. So this was his first feature film, and we'll talk about this later in the review. But there's a lot of elements of like commercial filmmaking, like with a lot of the running scenes. They're filmed in such a way as they're filmed in such a way where you can see how this guy used to. He comes from a background of making commercials and like advertisements and stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. It was written by a guy named Colin Welland. This guy wrote the original screenplay for the movie. This is not based on any type of book or anything. It's just based on his research and his own ideas. And obviously, the movie is inspired by fact, as we've said. But he wrote this movie, and he actually wasn't really a prominent screenwriter. He had actually acted in more movies than he had written screenplays for.
Really?
But this guy, he wrote this movie, and he ended up winning Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars that year. It has kind of an ensemble cast, but it stars Ben Cross as Harold Abrahams. I think this guy right here. Ian Charleston plays, of course, Eric Little, and then it has Nigel Havers plays their friend Lori Lindsay. You can see him back here. And then Cheryl Campbell plays little sister. Alice Craig plays Sybil, Harold's fiance. And then it made $59 million at the box office in North America, and that's not counting what it made worldwide. I was not able to find figures on that. But so yeah, it was a pretty profitable movie. Small budget movie, made a good profit. You know?
I can see why it's a small budget. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I say that we're going to talk about this in a second, but the production quality is just through the roof.
It's good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Having said that, let's get into our positives, and I think a great place to start is with the production quality of this movie. This movie is so 1920s.
Yeah.
It is. I was marveling at the costumes that they. This is often a positive I have, but I'm just telling it like I see it, y'all. This is a really well produced movie.
Mm-hmm.
So immersed in the 1920s, the cars, the buildings, and like these whole cities that they have that look like it's in the 1920s. It's like, wow!
Several times, a lot of the buildings, you were just like, "They're so beautiful."
I know, like especially the scene shot in Cambridge.
Yeah,
it's like whoa. But and they had so many people in the same room. They had these rooms decked out all 1920s. They removed every single trace of 1980s. Like this looked like it was filmed in a time machine.
Yeah.
Like it was so well done, and all of the actors. We'll get to acting in a second, but all the actors embodied that 1920s vibe so well. It was just so immersive, and I love that about this movie.
So bounce off that. I really enjoyed the production design as well. I really think it was a great period piece. Like they captured the flavor of the period, from the architecture to like just the culture that's depicted with all the singers and all the operas that are attended in the movie by the characters. Harold Abrahams is like obsessed with this group called Gilbert and Sullivan. They're singing this very catchy song actually called "He's an Englishman." Several times in the movie. It's pretty catchy, and the culture is depicted in a very cool way, and also the kind of the historical context is presented very well. With the movie takes place just after World War One.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to see World War I veterans.
That is such a cool thing that they added in when they're walking around the streets of.
They're arriving at Cambridge.
Exactly, and the movie acknowledges World War I by having like people getting pushed around in wheelchairs. Their legs are cut off, and this one dude has bandages all over his face because of like the or not tear gas, but like chlorine gas.
He looks like, honestly, that guy looked kind of like you know the genre, like the steampunk genre, where it's like that. It's like sci-fi. He looked like a guy that would be in like a steampunk movie or something.
I love
That's not. He was obviously beat up pretty bad.
And not only did they acknowledge historical events via like background stuff like that, but they also referenced it like it made a lot of sense because people were referencing events that would have been very relevant to them. Like the screenwriter amazingly managed to think like a 1920s person, and that comes out on screen.
And he did a lot of research from that. He interviewed all the people that were still alive at the time that had known these people.
Wow!
And he really wanted to obviously get the flavor of the time period down. And then the director just executed it.
Yes, good execution.
Very well,
really good execution.
So my first big positive will be we'll go ahead and talk about the score of the movie.
Yes,
all right,
so good.
If you haven't heard the main theme of this movie, you probably just haven't been alive. I mean, it is the da 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 da. I mean, it's very famous, and it's used in all kinds of sports videos and like motivational videos and stuff. But this is
played a lot.
No, they don't. They play it at the beginning and end of the movie. But I think that honestly, it could have been overplayed. They could have used it too much.
That's usually what happens. Is it gets overplayed, but in this instance, I think it was actually underplayed.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
it should have been played one more time.
In like the middle of something. Okay, but anyway, this score is just fantastic. So obviously, you have the main theme called "Chariots of Fire," and at the beginning, they're running on the beach, and it just. I mean, man, you get goosebumps hearing it as they're running on the beach, and it brings out these emotions within the audience. And that main theme is amazing. But the score is so good because it's not just that one theme.
Yeah,
it's diverse and it's dynamic.
It
has specifically two other amazing parts of the soundtrack.
Yeah.
One of them is called, I believe it's called Abraham's theme. It's this little like electronic beat. It's like, and it plays several times. You know what I'm talking about. It plays a lot of times. There's this one scene before Abraham's does his final race. He's in the locker room, and his trainer has written like a letter to him. And it's just this little subtle, kind of very sleepy like electronic beat, and it makes you feel like you're inside his like head, and it makes you feel like you're really you can really feel what he's feeling, and that's the sign of a great score.
Yeah,
is when it can put you inside the minds of the characters. And the third piece of music is, I believe it's called Eric's theme, and it plays several times. Most notably, it plays at the end when Eric wins his race before the winners, and it plays it's playing the voiceover of him saying, when I run, I feel God's pleasure, and then that theme comes up, and it's just phenomenal. So the music in this movie is just it gives me goosebumps.
And then I think I can dive into the net. I mean, to comment on what you're saying, that I obviously agree with this. The score, without the score, this movie would be far worse.
Oh yeah,
like
the score is amazing.
It's like a buoyant thing that's just boosting it up.
That's not a bad thing. I mean,
no, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, and it's like salt. You know what I mean? It's bringing out the flavor in the whole movie.
It's not the traditional period piece music. It's an electronic score.
Yeah, with
electronic instruments used.
But it manages to feel very classic at the same time.
Yeah. But it's like originally, from what I've read, when Vangelis was composing the score, he was going for more like a classical period movie vibe with like more like more hymn-esque and stuff, more like like that traditional kind of very just not like electronic. Like it was going to be more of like what you'd hear in a traditional period piece. But then he thought then he went with the electronic vibe, and he was like, and they were all like, man, that sounds amazing. And man, we're so glad that they went with it.
It's really good.
So it's not the type of score you think would be for this movie, but it fits so well.
It fits so well. Yeah. It's one of the best decisions.
It was. I feel like it was almost a risk them using it for this type of movie, but it worked 100%.
And it manages to feel like classic somehow.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
For sure. So you got another positive?
Yeah, the next positive is the acting. Yeah, like this is a really big positive to this movie. The performances across the board are just so good. Mm-hmm. You feel like, again, it's like watching it in a time machine. Mm-hmm. Like it just looks like regular people. None of it. They don't ever look like they're acting. Yeah, they look like they're just living their lives. Yeah. Especially the dude who plays Eric Little. Yeah. This He is Eric Little.
Like you feel like that scene where he says, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. Like you feel like that's like you feel that in him. Like when he says that, like he means it.
He makes you relate. He makes you relate to his character so well.
He's not just saying that to be like as like an excuse. You know that's like true. Like he believes this is glorifying God.
It is so cool.
Emotion is
all the acting across the board is good. I mean, I'm trying to think of any acting that was bad. There was no bad acting.
Abrahams was Ben
good.
Cross as Harold Abrahams was good.
He wasn't as good,
not as good,
but he was really good.
And he was good. You mentioned it, like he's an unlikable character. He's supposed to be kind of like he's an arrogant guy. Like that's his whole thing. But I feel like, and I'll talk about this another positive. I love his. He has some growth over the course of the movie, and I really enjoy that. But
I didn't even see the growth.
Okay, well,
might be because I was falling asleep.
It was so late.
It was really late.
It was like
watching this. I was like
11:00 when it was ending.
But so acting really good. The only person who I would say was like mid-tier acting was the person who played his Ben Cross's girlfriend,
Harold Abraham's girlfriend.
Yeah,
her fiance.
She was like just okay.
Yeah, she was a little bit. Yeah, she her line delivery was a little bit more like kind of.
It was a little bit too.
It was a little bit more like what's the word, like too dark, too like on the nose kind of.
Yeah, and then like the way she did have that scene when she was making eyes at him from the stage. Yeah, it was like so.
It was like
she was also very long. She was like.
Yeah. She does have a really great comeback line though. After he loses to Eric Little in the 100 meters, like halfway through the movie, he's all like mad and everything. He's like, if I don't, he's like, I don't run to take beatings. And then he says, if I can't win, I won't run. And she says, if you don't run, you can't win. Which was a good comeback.
And then she has another great comeback in that same scene.
Oh, yeah?
Well, what is it that he says?
Oh, he says,
like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she says, try growing up.
Yeah, she gives him the reality check.
Oh!
The reality check,
Oh,
bro.
he needed to hear
But that scene, this little nitpick, before we get to the negatives, that scene ended kind of in a cheesy way. It's like they kiss, and then it's like the trainer that ends up training him is like standing there. He's like, Abrahams, I'll train you. It was kind of a weird ending. Great scene.
I love the way he looked at the trainer, too. He's like,
yeah. But anyway. And speaking of the trainer, Ian Holm, Bilbo Baggins, great actor. He was nominated for a supporting actor. He didn't win, but he gave a great performance as just this very gruff, like hard smoking trainer. And his relationship with Harold Abrahams is very, very cool throughout the movie. You really get to see it develop. And he kind of just is like, he goes from being like strictly his trainer, like I'm going to help you win, to actually kind of becoming his friend.
Yeah.
They become very like emotionally connected by the end of the movie.